Good morning. Today we're going to hear a lecture on Chapter 3, Lesson 3, the Assyrian and the Persian Empire. Something that's kind of interesting, we're looking again at the part of the world that is what we would describe as Mesopotamia, the Fertile Crescent, modern day Iraq, the area where the Sumerian civilization emerged, then the Akkadian, and then the Babylonian. So this part of the world is super significant historically, and it, as we keep reading, it keeps on coming back up. So hopefully you have the PowerPoint up and running, Chapter 3, Lesson 3. And on the first slide, you see two pictures. You see, I believe that is King Ashurbanipal or Nebuchadnezzar. I can't remember which person I put up there. But that is an Assyrian ruler. And then on the other side is Cyrus the Great, the Persian emperor. So these are significant people connected to both empires. When we move to the next slide, which is the map of the Assyrian Empire, you can see where Assyria is. It's a region near the Tigris River. Nineveh was an important capital. And the thing that's kind of cool about this area, especially Nineveh itself, is that it was the site of the world's first library. And the reason why that's important is that although the Assyrians were super harsh, and we're going to talk about that in a moment, they did value the history of the conquered peoples. And so this library, for example, at Nineveh housed all the records and writings, even cuneiform tablets from the Sumerian time. And it was a place where history will be preserved, especially, the clay texts that exist before that. So interesting, in the early days, in ancient history, the idea of a library was more of a place to preserve rather than to just house books, because a lot of people didn't house books. So in any case, that's one kind of focal point on the map. You can see that the Assyrian Empire grew to a pretty large size, and that is a result of the very powerful Assyrian army. So if you move to the next slide, the Assyrian Empire, the main idea is that the Assyrians ruled with harsh tactics. And moving to the next slide, what do we know about these people? Well, they are Semitic-speaking people. And when we think of Semitic-speaking people, we're looking at people who are speaking modern-day Arabic today. That would be kind of the people. Also, Hebrew is a Semitic language. So they're connected to kind of this Middle Eastern Holy Land area. For the Assyrians, what made them most successful in terms of empire building was that they had large armies and very powerful weapons, more powerful than any of the other groups in the area. And in fact, everybody was afraid of the Assyrian military. And that's what made them successful in expanding to different areas of the Middle East. Okay. So just, as a way of kind of understanding why they were so successful, again, they just had a great, very efficient military, but they also killed a lot of people. They burned towns, they burned farms. They kind of use this fear tactic to get people to bow to them, unfortunately. And that becomes problematic because ultimately that brings an end to them. If you're going to rule over a large empire, you can't crack the whip on everybody at every second, or people are going to rebel. And so eventually they do, or they burn themselves out. Okay. So the Assyrian Empire will begin to decline, and in its place, let's move to the slide that says the Persian Empire. And we're going to look at the Persian Empire, but first we're going to look at who came into that area after the Persian, or after the Assyrians, and that's going to be the Chaldeans. So Nebuchadnezzar was a Chaldean king who used Babylon again, restored it as the center of a Chaldean empire that only lasted for a very short period of time. Okay. Nebuchadnezzar is probably, again, well known, I think, for the Old Testament, and also rebuilding Babylon and the Hanging Gardens. So kind of important, but you're going to see the Chaldean empire decline and fall to the Persians in 539. So moving to the next slide, we're at the Persian Empire, and you see a map of the Persian Empire, 500 BC. So the Chaldeans, who were ruling from Babylon, were conquered by the Persians. The Persians are, again, those Indo-European people that were nomadic, that settled below the Black Sea region and then moved everywhere. So when I talk about Indo-Europeans, you should automatically connect to the Greeks, to the different tribal groups in Italy and in Germany. They're all considered to be Indo-European. Even the people from the Indus River Valley civilization that we talked about are Indo-European. So they all come from like one common nomadic group. Okay, and on that map, you can see the greatest extent of the Persian Empire, from Egypt to Greece, as far east as India. And that's really what makes the Persian Empire special, is that it is a massive empire, but it is also run really efficiently and effectively, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So Cyrus was responsible for capturing Babylon and bringing it under eventually Persian control. Cyrus, who would be known as the Great, but not until after his rule, will be most well known for conquering and using restraint and wisdom, as well as tolerance. He learned very early on that to respect other groups of people as you conquer them is the only way to get people to fall into line. He also saw value in using the architecture, the art, the religion of the conquered peoples as a way of making them feel like they're part of something greater. So Cyrus is really important in the sense that he's creating kind of the recipe for what it means to run a successful empire, okay? And incorporating the diversity throughout the lands really gives him an opportunity to connect with the people and also make them feel like they're part of something greater. Moving to the next slide, the Persian Empire continued. We're looking at another map, and when Cyrus is gone, it is going to be, actually we're going to look at Cyrus's successor. That's the slide you should be on. His successor is going to be his grandson, Cambyses, who expands the empire, and then also another family member named Darius, or Darius, however you want to say it. But both of these men, in conjunction with what Cyrus had already done, creates the largest empire in history at that time. And as I said, from Egypt to Greece, as far east as India, And the question is, how are you ruling an empire so large? The answer is that you're breaking up your empire into what we would call provinces or states. And then every state would have and those provinces are called satrapies. And you would have a governor or a satrap who would be ruling over the area. It makes it more efficient than one person trying to do everything. These governors who would be appointed to different provinces would be in charge of making sure the laws were being followed, that taxes are being collected, because that's really important to the survival and the financial aspect of the empire. Also recruiting soldiers. So this system of what the Persians are doing in terms of having this massive empire and breaking it down into smaller provinces with local rulers is genius. And it's going to be what the Romans use, that Alexander the Great uses. This is the foundation for what it means to be a good ruler. Okay, so Cyrus is kind of laying the foundation, and his successors, Cambyses and Darius, are going to continue that. Moving to the next slide, Darius, who we're going to focus on here, is going to do something interesting to connect the empire. And that is create a road system. The Romans are going to do this as well. They're going to follow exactly what the Persians did in terms of connecting the empire. So on this map, you see a red road from Sardis to Susa. So from what is modern day Turkey all the way to what would be near Iraq. Okay, and the idea here with this royal road is that it allows for greater communication and trade and travel. This royal road, interestingly enough, is part of the very first mail system to occur. Being able to send messages throughout the empire in a week keeps everybody connected. You are also going to see that during this time period, the Persians are going to try to create a common currency. They are going to create a common system of weights and measures. They are just going to try to connect people as much as possible, and also continue that policy of tolerance and respect and wisdom towards the conquered people. If you have an empire this large, the other thing that you need to do is make sure that you have a super strong military that can hold it together. And this military was created so that if you ever lost a soldier, a new soldier would automatically come in and take the place. And it's so as though soldiers lived forever, because there was such a large number that were willing to step in and take place of another. So these are called the immortals. And this keeps a very large, strong Persian empire and Persian military. So things are looking good for the Persian Empire, but as we all know, all good things have to come to an end. So we're looking at about the time of, let's see, a little before 330 BC. So we're looking at the 500s BC to about the 330s. So several hundred years of a very powerful empire. What happens? Well, we're on the slide right now that says after Cyrus and Darius, what happens? And the answer is the monarchy is going to become weak. And part of the reason why the monarchy becomes weak is that the rulers who aren't Cyrus and Darius, obviously, are less kind of connected to the people. The other problem here, which is a big problem throughout a lot of history, as we're going to continue to study, is that the rulers are polygamous. There is no such thing as like marriage to one person at this point. So when you have several wives and you die, those people, ladies, are going to fight to have their son placed in power and put them on the throne. So there's going to be a lot of fighting, a lot of court intrigue. There's going to be all sorts of corruption. And people are going to lose focus on what's important, and that leads to the decline. There's less loyalty to rulers at this time, and as a result, by 330 BC, the Persian Empire will fall to the Macedonian Empire of Alexander the Great, who will kind of pick it up and keep and make this great Persian Empire, actually the Macedonian Empire. He's going to be interesting in that Alexander will keep a lot of the policies of the Persians in terms of including everybody and being inclusive. But one thing, at the end of the day, the Persian Empire, while it does fall and become weak, it lays the foundation for good government and good leadership and efficient tactics to rule and to hold on to a massive empire. Moving on to the next slide here, it's called the Cyrus cylinder, it says on the slide. And what I would like for you to do is do a little research on the Cyrus cylinder. And on Canvas, under assignments, is the Cyrus cylinder activity. And you need to submit your answers to the assignment as it is on assignments. So this is going to be kind of an interesting activity. I want you to do a little research. I want you to respond, and please make sure that wherever you get your information from, you are giving credit to your sources. Okay, hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you on day 1.